Hey everybody, it's GK and we're here today to kind of show you some things that we've got and have been working on since last episode. Here's a stack of incoming mail. We've got 7 items right here that we've purchased from other card sellers or people that they had some cards that they wanted to sell, but they didn't want to go through the hassle and the riffraff of listing them online and all that stuff, because it can, between the listing, the shipping, and dealing with customers, some people just don't want to do that. And so we're willing to help them out. So we buy these lots of cards, and then we go ahead and we put them on market ourselves. And then also too, we've got another stack of mail, and this is outgoing mail. So we've got 10 items here that we're going to ship out today. We packed them up earlier this morning, and they're headed to the mailbox whenever we go out to do our day's work. Now, how that all ties together with the recurring theme and something that we touched on in the last episode of of letting go of your cards, I think one of the things that is most important for us and maybe a lot of other card sellers is the why, right? And we kind of touched on that earlier with this stack of incoming mail, is that those people that were sending cards to us that wanted, that were looking to move them but not deal with the riffraff, that was kind of their why, right? And then for our outgoing mail, there's a why attached to that too, and we haven't really talked about that since we've been active on social media. But really, it goes back to why are we selling cards? And it's very important to have a why, because without that why, it's going to be difficult to sell cards over time. Any of us can list a card, have that card sell, get that card to the customer. That's not a problem. It's not that hard. And trust me, I'm not trying to insult your intelligence or overthink this process at all. But it is difficult to have 10 sales. It's difficult to have 20 sales. It's difficult to have 50 sales. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have a pretty solid why, because a lot of times, like this bag here, and it might be full of high-end RPAs that will list for a lot of money, generate a lot of cash flow. But most likely, a lot of our sales are going to be made up with cheaper cards, like a 99-cent PWE shipment. And when you've got to grind out like 25, 30 of those a day, it's really tough, because that's where we go back, and you need that why. And for us, the why started about probably a little over 30 years ago, maybe even close to 40 years ago. So between 35 and 40 years ago, when we were young, we collected baseball, basketball, football, all 3 major sports. And, we had some buddies, they're in our little bike gang, Sandlot baseball crew that had, they talked about card shops, and there was a card shop in our area there in Wichita, Kansas, near where I was growing up. And one day my dad took me there, because I pestered him, that I wanted to go to this card shop and see what it's all about. And I took some cards, and at the time, I believe it was right around 1980, the Kansas City Royals were, they were big time, and especially there in that area. And I took, I had some George Bretts and some Willie Wilsons and Hal McRae's and Frank White's, Darryl Porter's, Quisenberry. There's several big name Royal guys, and I was taking them with me, and I wasn't taking them to sell, and I wasn't even taking them to find out how much they were worth. Really, at that time, between me and my buddies, we just kind of shared these cards, and I knew that I was going to this card shop, and I just wanted to share what I had, And so we got there and met the guy behind the counter, and it didn't go so well. And I didn't really know what was going on until I got a lot older and realized what happened to make it not go so well. But anyway, here's a guy behind the counter, and he's an older dude, and he was a collector from from back east, the East Coast. And so, he had an East Coast guy in a Midwest town selling baseball cards and the like, and walked in. It was a magical place, man. The walls were filled with memorabilia. Shelves were stocked with cards. The display counters were filled with cards. I was in heaven, right? And I kind of put my cards on the counter, and the guy was like, "Well, hey kid, man, you don't have much there. Those cards aren't worth anything." Well, even though I was only about 10 at the time, 9, 10 years old, I had a George Brett sitting there, like a 1980 George Brett, and I've got my George Brett sitting on top of the counter. Right underneath it was another George Brett that just happened to be sleeved in a top loader, and the guy wanted like $12 for it. And I was like, man, how does that work? What I've got laying here is not worth anything, but you're saying the same damn thing's worth 10 times the value what you're telling me mine is worth. Well, my dad was with me, and my dad kind of took offense to the way that this guy was doing business, and he basically pulled me out of there. We didn't buy anything that day, and on the way home, my dad was like, we'll never do business with people like that kind of demean you. He said he wasn't there to sell us cards. He was just there to show off what he had. And, you don't want to get involved with people like that, So that was one formative experience that kind of helped to guide us as nowadays, what we're doing. So then you fast forward about 13 years, back in the early 90s during the junk wax era. And at the time, I was in the Marine Corps, and I was getting ready to transition out. And when you're getting ready to transition out of the military or begin your next big life adventure, you've got all these things you want to do, like these goals or whatever that is just something you want to accomplish. And a lot of people, is like buy a house, get married, start a family, find a job, begin that career, make that transition. Well, I was living off base and traveling back and forth. I go by this card shop every day in Escondido, California. And I stopped in there one day, and it had been about 4 or 5 years since I'd bought any cards. I stopped in there to kind of find out what was going on, and got to talking with the guy. And the guy was, he was in his mid-30s, super knowledgeable, super friendly, talked to me about things. And like I said, a lot of people have goals and dreams and transition out of the military. And to be honest with you, man, the only goal I really had is I wanted to complete a set of football cards. It was something I would never been able to complete a set when I was a kid collecting. And I had some money, and I knew I could go in there and I could complete a set. And that guy at that card shop in Escondido sold me a set of 1993 playoff. And that was our first set. That was the first set that I put together or bought, or is the first box set that I had, man. And I was ecstatic. That was my main goal. And it really kind of clicked like, hey, man, I would like to do that for a living. I would like to have a card shop and not be like that guy from way back, there in Kansas, and just being that bristly, hey, kid, your cards aren't worth nothing. I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to be more along the lines of this other guy, right? So that's when I was about 23. So like now 25 years later, we got back into collecting, and we found social media. And the convergence of those two things, is an amazing thing. So we wanted to learn about business, and we wanted to try to grow personally and professionally in business. And the thing that we had at our disposal, just at our immediate disposal, was this collection of sports cards. So we decided to go for it. And that's kind of how we got, or why we got to doing what we're doing. So along the way, we made some great connections, great contacts, and we've learned a whole lot about not only how to utilize social media, but also just how to cash flow a business, right? So that's our why. And that's what keeps us going when all we've got are these 1 or 2 99-cent PWE sales. And because you need a strong why is what I'm trying to say. So, if you want to sell a card here and there, hey man, no sweat. It's easy to do. We're going to talk about how to get that. Like we said, we're not trying to overthink this or anything like that, but we also want to address a fundamental reason before we ever get to listing cards. We want to be able to separate the cards that we want to sell, and we want to know why we're going to put them to market, because it's not an easy task to put cards to market. It's not as easy as it appears, especially if you want multiple sales or you want to find a viable way to earn some extra income for whatever purposes you may have, and that might be a huge determining factor on your why. So we just wanted to touch on that real quick. Thanks for taking the time to stop by and listen. We appreciate you. Find us anywhere on social media, GK45by5, or on the website 45by5sportscards.com. Thanks for your time. We'll see you again soon.